Hello, this is just a quick video to show you the insides of a Type 3030 brake. There's a lot of YouTube videos on how to safely disarm these brake units because of the hefty emergency brake spring in them, but throwing them away seems to be the main way of dealing with them. But I took it up as a challenge to disassemble one to see exactly what's inside one. And for those who are curious, this one was found dumped at one of the local truck stops, just thrown in the garden, so it didn't really belong to anyone that I could notice. So to get the trivial matters out of the way, these are the two clamps that were used to secure it. The two cylinders, the two chambers together. This is, I'll try and keep them so. This is the service side here, and this will be the emergency spring brake area. So this is the one that's got the tag on it, says do not remove, spring loaded, etc, etc. There's a fair warning, and rightly so. So I'll put them aside for the time being. The part which most people are familiar with is the service side, and these go together. So there's a spring, and this is the return spring that just sits on this side of this piston. There's a seal which goes in there, which doesn't really seal much actually. It's probably more to keep a bit of the dirt out. So I'll just leave this spring over there for the time being. So that goes in there like that. It does locate the spring a little bit better, and of course the clevis screws onto the end right there, and that's the part which we're most familiar with. This of course being the mounting bolts which go onto your brake bracket, and this is the actual clevis that goes onto the brake actuating arm. So that's that part. Now between that and the alloy chamber, which most people are familiar with, you've got one side your service airline and the other one's your to release your emergency brakes. There's a pancake, and the pancake sits on one side of this diaphragm with the piston like that, and it sits in there like that. So now pushing on this one side is the actual brake, and it's with the combined force of the spring, it's releasing the brakes, and through this sort of bowl comes the actuating rod, which is for the emergency brake. Now on this particular unit there's quite a bit of play in here. In fact, when you pull it apart, there's two O-rings in there, and both of them have just been completely flogged out. So this thing's been leaking brake from the emergency line into the service area for some time, and possibly causing the brakes to drag and all sorts of other headaches for the driver. So moving right along, this is the area where this is the tube through which normally a caging bolt sits, so you can release the brakes, release the emergency brake if you need to. But when I found this unit on the side of the road, there was no caging bolt with it. So hence I had to make a tool completely from scratch to safely disarm this whole emergency brake area, so then I could safely tear it down. So on the emergency side, as you can see, because there's been leaking, it's drawn a lot of crud and everything through and made quite a mess. Underneath this side, again, to help release the brakes, there's another one of these springs. Now these springs are not very strong, okay, but the one on this side had a problem. It had broken, and you can sort of see right there just some of the marks as it's been going around and completely causing havoc and pushing this thing off center, which eventually wore a hole through the emergency pancake, which would mean ultimately the driver had no way of releasing this emergency brake on this unit. would have been game over. So again, putting things sort of back together a little bit. I'm trying not to move things around too much to keep the racket down. So that sits on there like that one. Again, with that busted spring, but it's not supposed to be busted under there with the pancake. And it's, like I said, with these two springs, you know, there's a reasonable pressure trying to push it that way. So on the other side of this pancake, we start to have the business end of the emergency brake. So we have, again, a piston, but it's really a placeholder for the spring and protect the pancake from the emergency spring. That sits in there like that. Also, this is the part which the caging bolt normally locks into, and you can see just in there the shape of it. So you push the caging bolt in, and its ears will go down under that ledge there and then lock in that slot there. So you only have to put it in and turn it 90 degrees and then pull it again. If it doesn't come out, then it's pretty well locked in there. So that goes on there. You have another part that goes on there, which is to try and manage the big spring, and that's just a dome shaped thing that sits on top of that. And then on top of that sits the big nasty spring, which a lot of YouTube videos tell you not to play with, and rightly so. This is a substantial spring. There is no way you can compress this by hand. It sits on there like that. I'll just move these out the way quickly. And then finally we have the last chamber. So I'll just put it all on its side like this. And this is the actual back of it. So as you can see right there, there is a good hand space in there, which probably about 20 centimeters, that spring is compressed when that retaining clamp is done up and holding these two flanges together. So there's a substantial amount of energy contained in these to apply that brake in an emergency situation. So again, like I said, this one had failed ultimately because the pancake worn through, broken spring. And to make matters worse for the driver, who had to try and manage this and consequently just threw it away, this back area had sustained some damage as well. I'll try and frame it, and you can see it's quite severely bent. So even if he did have the caging bolt and tried to put it in there and tighten it up to release the emergency brake, there's a good chance that it probably wouldn't have anyway. The washer would have been all kinked over and bent over and stuff, and it would have been very hard, a lot of pressure to apply it there, and really make it very difficult to release the brake. So why did I pick it up? Well, I don't need the emergency side of it. The part that I'm interested is in this side, and hopefully, all things going well, I'll be featuring that in a future video. So it'll be like that, and I'm just going to make a blanking part to blank off that hole, and I have a serviceable air cylinder. Anyway, all the best, and thanks for your time.